Next to you, Starstruck, an Adrienette, apartment neighbors, fake dating, famous alternate universe fanfiction, Chapter 12. And we're almost on, Adrian whispers and points to the little TV screen to their left, showing the stage and how much more time they have till their bit. They're sitting in the green room for their first ever interview. Truthfully, Marinette's rather nervous. Adrian is also bouncing up and down in his seat a little, but she doubts that he's as worried as she is. "Are you nervous?" he asks her with a concerned expression on his face and tilted head. Marinette nods. She very much so is. Adrian smiles at her gently. "Don't be. There's no need to. Everybody already loves you," he tells her. Marinette huffs a laugh. "I appreciate that, but really, that doesn't make me feel any less nervous," she says with a wire smile. Adrian hums quizzingly. "How about this? Thinking of it as like talking to a friend, not an interview, because that sounds way scarier. Nadia's super nice, and she doesn't pry into anything that you don't feel comfortable sharing. Imagine she's just another one of your friends that you're telling a story to," he tells her kindly. Marinette takes a breath and nods. "Okay, I'll try and think of it like that," she says. Her hands are twisting together as she takes in deep, calming breaths. She feels a hand on top of her own, stopping the nervous habit. Adrian's smiling at her with kind eyes, and she feels herself melt just a little bit. "You're going to be great. Everybody is going to love you. They already do. I mean, how could they not?" His voice is soft, and Marinette's heart jumps a little at his words. She bites her lip and nods. "Thanks," she says. Adrian smiles, bobbing his head up and down. "You are up in 5, a set assistant says. Marinette hadn't even noticed them opening the door and sticking their head into the room. She bolts upright, thanking the assistant who points them to the backstage, where they will enter from. "She'll announce, and then step up on that little X until the curtain's pulled," they tell her, before pressing some button on their headset and running off, busy as a bee. Marinette turns to Adrian and feels his hand slip into hers. For a second, her brain freezes, and suddenly she's back in high school, giggling like a child because the boy that she thought was cute looked at her in the hallways for a second. "I'll take over if you get too nervous," Adrian promises her with a squeeze of their hands. Marinette just knows that the smile she gives him is wide and goofy and silly, but there is a fair amount of adrenaline running through her veins, and the curtain is now moving, so she doesn't care enough to be totally embarrassed. There is a live audience, and they break out in loud applause when Marinette and Adrian are in view. She feels her face blush. Nervously, she waves and smiles. Adrian looks as if he's totally calm, and it does make sense, as he has been doing these sorts of interviews and stuff for his entire life. Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Take a seat and make yourselves comfortable," Nadia cries out, waving her arms. Marinette takes a seat on the red couch, and Adrian grins next to her. "I cannot believe you're here. I think I speak for everyone on Earth when I say that I have been waiting for this day to come. It is time to set all of the records straight," Nadia laughs. The live audience laughs along with her, and Marinette's mind stutters for a little bit from the lack of the pseudo-laugh tracks that she normally hears when watching TV. "It certainly is," Adrian answers, looking much more at ease than she does. "There is a lot going around," he says. I would say, Nadia grins and shuffles her papers. Marinette leans back infinitesimally. She's worried. She's still worried that Nadia will become a shark, like Lila, pulling information out of her until there is a mass feeding frenzy. So, let's start at the beginning. How did you two meet? As far as all of us, are aware, Marinette isn't in the business of acting or modeling, Nadia asks with a tilt of her head. Or are you? There's a teasing but not malignant lilt in her voice, and it helps Marinette ease up in the slightest way. Marinette giggles and shifts her attentions as all the attention shifts onto her. No, I'm not, she explains. I'm actually an interior designer. Not the most glamorous job, but one that I'm rather happy with, she explains. Her eyes flicker over to Adrienne. Nodding, they confirm the story that Tiki and Plag had helped them develop. All of them knew that this question was coming. It was very inescapable. So they came up with a story with minimum drama and made it so basic it was kind of hard to point out the flaws in it. We actually met in a coffee house. I promise you, it is not as wild as some of the magazines seem to think that the first meeting was. I was off work and I needed a bite and went to find a seat. The place was rather deserted, so I found a spot by the fireplace, which was normally taken up, but since it was open, I really wanted to sit there. I was sitting in the chair in front of her, panicked out of my mind. Adrienne took over the storytelling and flashed a grin at the cameras. There were certainly going to be some swooning viewers at home. And care to elaborate why? Nadia cuts in with a mischievous grin. Adrienne chuckles. As much as I'd like to say it's because a pretty girl was sitting next to me, the entire audience shrieks and awes, and even Nadia looks like she melted just a bit. I actually didn't notice it at first. This had happened a few weeks after I'd left my father's company, so what I was actually nervous about was whether or not she'd recognize me, as me. I have managed to evade direct press and fans up until that point, thanks to hiding out in my flat. So, the last thing I wanted was for her to recognize me and then start drawing all the attention onto me, Adrienne explains. Which is kind of what happened, but not exactly either. Marinette nudges Adrienne's side in a way that makes the audience coo once again. Her face flashes a bit at that. So, okay, technically, she is his girlfriend, so she could do all of those couple and flirty things, but it did still make her feel like a teenage girl messing and flirting with a poor shy boy in high school. Oh, Nathaniel. He was so sweet. Marinette hopes he's doing well. I asked him to pass me a magazine from the table. Coincidentally, it was one about him. A very in-depth theory as to why he had decided to leave the company, Marinette says with a slight laugh. Adrienne turns away slightly, wincing. And that makes the story they're telling seem that much more believable. She's in awe, really. He seems to know exactly what to do to make it seem real. After all, he is an actor, she supposes. Making things seem real is his entire job. It was safe to say, I thought I'd been found out. My first instinct was to muffle a shout and pull her out of the coffee shop without warning, Adrienne laughs, looking sheepish as he rubs the back of his neck. I thought I was getting kidnapped, Marinette jokes. And then you would have been in one of those online teenage storybooks, Nadia laughs back. Kidnapped by the famous rogue celebrity. She spreads her arms out across the air as if she could see the title in shining lights. The #1 bestseller book turned into a hit movie starring the two of you, Nadia teases. Interesting pitch, but not exactly what happened. I was borderline in tears. So it wasn't as menacing as I think you'd have to be to, do that. But that was about the time that I started panicking, Marinette pipes in. Adrian looks at her with a look that reads, seriously? She tries her best to blink back innocently at him. What? She teases. Anyway, I dragged her to my house, which, wow, that really does sound like kidnapping. But basically, I got really scared and ripped off my sunglasses and my hat and begged her, on my knees begged her not to tell the press that she'd found out it was me all along, Adrian said. And I was like, what? I didn't even know it was you until now, Marinette says with an animated arm gesture. The audience roars with laughter. He ended up feeling super bad and said sorry and was honestly a total mess the entire time, she laughs as Adrian pouts at her for exposing him to the world. Luckily, it didn't make me hate him, even though he was totally sure that I did for a good 2 weeks. But we became friends. A warm feeling spreads through her body. Adrian had slipped their hands together at some point through the story. Adrian is holding her hand on live television. Marinette flickers her eyes to him and she just knows that she is bright red. He smiles back at her with a sweet smile, and it makes her giggle. It didn't take long for me to start liking her. I mean, look, she's the best. Marinette's extremely kind to overlook the unfortunate events of our first meeting, and she's wonderful too, Adrian says honestly. He holds her hand even tighter, and Marinette wants to laugh out loud at the silent gaping face that Nadia's making at them. The audience is definitely freaking out, and she doesn't blame them in the slightest for doing so. I ended up telling her that I liked her in the most awkward and awful way possible, but she still agreed to go on a date with me, and it was basically the greatest day of my life, I think, he admits with a small smile. There's another coo that runs through the crowd, and Marinette giggles nervously. Oh, you're making me sound like I'm a saint, she nudges Adrian's side teasingly. I'm not an angel come to life, Marinette points out. You are to me, he says softly. You two are sweeter than candy, Nadia cries out with excitement. But I'm guessing the cameras caught you during a visit, she asks, and presses a button on a remote. Instantly, the infamous first picture that when they were caught together shows on the giant screen behind them. Marinette sucks in a hard breath at that photo. Yes, Marinette confirms with a nervous head nod. It was definitely not how we wanted things to get around, but it was what happened, she says. The sentence was true. A picture with Adrian being sent around social media was not at all how they wanted to meet. But that was what happened, and now they were dealing with the repercussions of it. We were hoping to announce it during something akin to this. She waves and motions around them, pointing to the audience, interviewer, and monitors. Something more controlled and, later in the relationship so that we could be super stable. Truthfully, we pushed this back as soon as we could, Marinette says with a laugh and winks. Immediately, she regrets doing the latter. But Adrian seems to be amused by it and her hidden embarrassment. That is understandable. But we are so very glad to have you, Nadia says eagerly. It's then that Marinette is reminded that no matter how nice or friendly or down-to-earth Nadia is or seems to be, she's still doing her job. And that job has quite a few conflicting interests with her. In the end, Nadia is still looking for a story, one to sell to the public, and Marinette is still trying to close herself off from the horrors of would-be media. Of course, Adrienne responds for her. I always like reminiscing in the past. And we love hearing about it, Nadia says eagerly. She leans in towards Marinette with a smile that looks a little bit overexcited. So, on that note, do tell us more about you. Tell us your hopes, your dreams, hobbies, likes, dislikes, everything. We want to hear it all. Nadia grins. Marinette smiles shyly and pulls herself slightly back. Oh, well, I don't think that I'm that interesting, she starts out, but Nadia cuts in with an exaggerated laugh. Oh, don't say that. You've managed to charm the Adrienne Agreste, so I think that's rather interesting. Nadia cuts in with a mischievous smile. Sure, Marinette says nervously. But really, I'm a regular person like everyone else watching this, she insists, waving towards the camera. Nadia laughs at the statement as if it was meant to be a joke. It's not, and that makes it a bit of an awkward time for Marinette. Nadia moves forward a bit with an eager look in her eyes. Aren't we all? She chuckles with the audience. Whatever that sentence meant. Did you ever think you'd be here when you were young? What were you spending your time on? Those were the questions that Marinette had been holding her breath for. Oh, well, I was a pretty loud kid, Marinette admits. I did student government and all that, class president, student council. I certainly didn't think I'd be on this kind of stage in the future. Nadia grins happily at her answer. Leadership type. Now that makes sense, especially with your red power suit. That was a big choice, but it was a great one. The image splashed on the screen is now one of her and Adrienne at the fashion show. She's not directly looking into the camera, but it makes her look powerful somehow. Out of the corner of her eye, Marinette notices Adrienne's proud smile. It makes her flush. Wherever did you get it? It looks so cool, Nadia urges her to spill, and Marinette is not surprised. A lot of articles had been mentioning the power suit and speculating designers. Some were even convinced that Adrienne's father made it for her, which was outright absurd. Actually, she made it, Adrienne cuts in proudly. Everyone in the audience is aghast, and Marinette feels her cheeks go red. It feels slightly like bragging, which is something that she doesn't like to do, but Adrienne just looks so proud of her and so eager to show off her work. She doesn't want to scold him for doing so. He's just happy for her. There's nothing wrong with that. Nadia is stuttering her response. Wow, that is impressive. She turns towards Marinette. I think that is something to talk about. How did you make it? Everyone leans in to hear her, and Marinette feels like it's all colliding in her face. Well, it took time and effort, like everything else, she starts. Everyone is hanging off her every word, and it's kind of nerve-wracking. I've always sewed and designed, so it was something I really wanted to do, she admits. Nadia nods. Do tell us more. And she does. We're finished with that, Adrienne says the moment the curtains close behind them. They're finished with the interview, and Marinette lets out a sigh of relief. Yeah, we are, she says. She feels drained from smiling so wide and sitting up so stiff and being so conscious of her appearance. Now she can slump down in the green room and breathe. Adrienne rests a hand comfortingly on her shoulder. You did great, he says sincerely. Marinette smiles at him warily. First one down. We still have many more to go, Marinette sighs. Adrienne laughs a bit and squeezes her shoulder. She feels lighter already. We're doing them all together, so it'll be okay. You and me. We're a team. Her heart flutters.